Hello and welcome back to the channel. We'll be doing this video from Simple History, Strange Military Deaths, and there'll be 4 deaths in this video. And yeah, remember to like and subscribe and all that. And let's go on the video.
4 strange military deaths.
Sorry, I may not be too loud in this
Although
video.
death shouldn't be entertaining, throughout history there have been some occasions where the poor soul has been so unlucky or caught in such strange circumstances, it's almost impossible to be anything other than interested. There was the owner of the Segway, who later died falling off a cliff while on one. Or famous early 20th century dancer Isadora Duncan, who jumped in her car, got her scarf tangled in the wheels, and was strangled to death the moment the driver took off. And the military is no exception. Not all who die while wearing a uniform do so in battle, or as you might expect. Some
very rarely, actually. So there was this Civil War officer who was, I can't remember which battle he was in, and he was shot just after he said that the enemy couldn't shoot an elephant from this distance. And they shot him square blank in the forehead. It was brilliant.
Unfortunate souls have died in truly strange ways. Number 1. The Siege of Famagusta. In more early modern times, military deaths could be ceremonial, unusual, or just plain gruesome. One that still stands out around 500 years later is that of Venetian captain Mark Antonio Bragadin. In 1570, the Ottomans invaded Famagusta in Cyprus as part of their goal to seize control of the Mediterranean. At the time, the island was under the control of the Venetians, and Famagusta was in the hands of strong leadership in Bragadin. However, this wasn't enough, as the force of the Ottomans bombarding the city for months on end meant the Venetians found themselves running low on food, ammo, and resources.
Why is there boats on grass? I don't understand that.
Despite the citizens begging that they surrender, Bragadin refused until July 31st, 1571, when the city was dying and many of its citizens starving. The next day, he surrendered to Lala Mustafa Pasha, commander of the Ottoman army, who promised safe passage off the island to the Venetians. What happened next is unclear, but whatever did happen, Pasha changed his mind about providing safe passage for the surrendered forces, possibly in anger due to the massive loss of tens of thousands of Ottoman troops in the siege, or possibly in response to 6 victors' attitude.
I don't actually know much about this, so I can't really say anything about it
on this, but they do not on what happened next. In response, Pasha set about executing one of the strangest and most gruesome deaths on Captain Bragadin, later going down in history for its brutality. Pasha ordered that Bragadin's nose and ears be cut off, and over the coming days, wounds still gaping and open, he was forced to carry earth to fill ditches, kissing the ground every time Pasha crossed his path. After 17 days of torture, according to Crowley, he was then tied to a chair and set above a ship's mast for the masses to stare and jeer, before finally being taken and literally skinned alive. One of the most horrific execution methods.
Actually, the skinning alive bit is kind of like the Chinese 1,000 cuts, which is an ancient Chinese way of execution, where every now and again they will take a cut. They take chunks of flesh off of the victim until they died, and they'd either come to injury or infection.
It's in history. Finally, his corpse was stuffed with straw, dressed in commander robes, and paraded through the streets of Famagusta atop a cow. It was a strange and brutal death for the revered Venetian captain. Or shine. Check out their early Black Friday sale at Vessi.com/simple history. Number 2. Nuclear accident. On January 3rd, 1961.
Okay, that sounds familiar, but why is this a strange military death? Unless it was nuclear testing, then I guess that would make sense.
2 Army specialists, John A. Burns and Richard Leroy McKinley, alongside Navy electrician Richard C. Legg.
McKinley. that rings a bell.
Found themselves tasked with the
I think I know which this one is, actually. Which, if it is what I think it is, yeah, this was definitely very strange. But I didn't think it was counted as military.
Responsibility of restarting the SL-1 nuclear reactor in Idaho after it had been shut down for 11 days for routine maintenance. All 3 military personnel were on active duty and only in their 20s. Both Legg and Burns had received their certification as reactor operators, and McKinley was due to pass his own the next month before things went tragically wrong. The SL-1 power plant, short for Stationary Low Power Reactor Number 1, was a prototype small mobile reactor at one of America's major atomic testing stations. The idea was that the tech could be developed so the Army could employ it in remote areas.
Yeah, and it actually kind of started the basis of some nuclear weapons, actually, which I think was quite weird for nuclear power plant, but I guess it worked.
Fortunately, when Burns, aged 22, went to restart the reactor, it's believed he pulled the control rod 20 inches out of the core, which was tragically too far. The resulting reaction caused a wall of steam, metal, and water to rush towards the 3 men, killing Burns.
Which is actually a steam explosion, which is what happened to Chernobyl about 20 years later. And because a steam explosion is so large, it has meant that actually Chernobyl you can't be in a 20-kilometer radius of Chernobyl for the next 250,000 years.
Burns and Legg instantly, with McKinley dying approximately 2 hours later. It was the first nuclear reaction on U.S. soil to result in casualties, and not necessarily the way you'd expect to go on duty. Number 3, the Chichi-Jima incident.
Oh.
Long before George H.W. Bush or George Bush Sr. was president, he was a World War II fighter pilot involved in Pacific air raids in Chichi-Jima, a small but well-fortified Japanese island. On the second...
Well, yeah, when you, so, as they were pushing up to Japan, what had happened was, closer and closer they got to Japan, the more ferociously they would fight, and this is kind of how this happened. And... yeah, they weren't fighting as ferociously as they were when they almost got to the Japanese mainland, but they were fighting very ferociously for a different reason.
Of September 1944, Bush was tasked with destroying the island's radio towers. It was 8:15 a.m. when the Japanese anti-aircraft guns hid in wait in the forest below, and the squadron of TBM Avengers nosedived over their target. Bush watched as thunderous flak greeted them, with the lead planes burning up into smithereens, shaking, holding his breath, and taking heavy fire.
To be honest, I don't know how he didn't die.
Himself, he continued to fly through the dark clouds of what remained of his peers and unloaded his 4 500-pound bombs. Seeing his engine up in smoke, he managed to parachute himself into the middle of the ocean, a few miles northeast of the Chichi-Jima island. But his crewmates were not as quick and perished. With the Japanese already sailing out to capture him, he was rescued by a U.S. submarine that emerged from the ocean to take him on board. He was the lucky one. Over the decades, author James Bradley...
because everyone else he knew on that mission had died. He didn't. There was some really good luck there, but he knew what to do, and he also didn't have as many shots directed to him until later on.
Spoke to and tracked down the family and friends of Bush's naval aviator peers, as well as relatives of the Japanese commanders. Bradley uncovered transcripts of secret war crime trials that showed just how horrifically 8 other American POWs of Chichi-Jima had died. American bombers would kill more Japanese civilians than soldiers during World War II, so their fates when captured were merciless. They were beaten and tortured before being killed. But it's what came next that was truly gruesome. As instructed by Lieutenant General Tachibana, the unprovisioned Japanese dissected and skinned alive the now dead airmen and ate their fallen enemies. Not a meal many would want to share. The truth of the cannibalism that occurred during World War II was only uncovered decades later, when the SEAL...
Yeah, so that's weird. You know, you don't really expect soldiers to eat the fallen enemies. But again, it's war, and if you're desperate, you're going to have to eat something. You're going to eat someone eventually if you're desperate enough.
The documents finally came to light. Number 4, John Sedgwick.
Oh, this is who I was talking
Union
about.
General John Sedgwick has gained his place in history for 2 reasons. For being the highest-ranking Union casualty of the United States Civil War, and for his awkwardly ironic death on the battlefield. It was a light skirmish that took place on May 9, 1864. In fact, the general was busy bantering with Officer Martin T. McMahon when, as he described, a sprinkle of bullets came down upon them, and several officers dodged out of the way. Sedgwick himself, a well-liked general, laughed and teased his officers that the enemy couldn't hit an elephant at this distance, which really is
and they
just
was instantly shocked.
Moments later, another rain of bullets forced a nearby soldier to abruptly dodge to the ground, in essence throwing himself at Sedgwick's feet, who laughed and repeated his comment. According to McMahon, he said, "Why, my man, I am ashamed at you, dodging that way."
So yeah, I just said about this. And, because of this, he was actually revered for his bravery, stupidity, and because he was so good at his job.
Couldn't hit an elephant at this distance. What happened next seemed almost comically timed. After the soldier's quick reply, the general laughed and said, "All right, my man, go to your place." Mere minutes after the second, a third sprinkle of bullets hit the party, and General Sedgwick was tragically struck under his left cheek, dying almost instantly. Just goes to show, you should never tempt fate. Although in the military, a certain amount of death is
Anyway, it's the end of the video, so remember to like and subscribe and all that, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.